Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast for Thursday, April the 3rd. I'm Zach Ewing with Reed Darcey and Scott Rabalais. They cover women's basketball, specifically Reed. Rab, you cover a little bit of everything, including the Masters over your left shoulder there, which you're none of us are jealous or anything, but you're heading down there on Monday.
You can be jealous. It's all right. I don't. It doesn't matter to me.
So, guys, we're here to recap women's basketball today. Reed, have you kind of recovered from the postseason yet? The grind of the postseason?
I think so, but now we're in the grind of the transfer portal. So there's really not much of a reprieve. I don't know if I ever got adjusted to Pacific time. So I think my body clock never adjusted, so I can just drop back into Central time and I'm good. So I think I'm good there. So
yeah, if LSU had won against UCLA on Sunday, of course, y'all would be in Tampa right now covering the Final Four with, day before press conferences and all those sorts of things. But alas, LSU falls short 72-65. We did do a full post-game show on Sunday after the game. Rab and I did. So I don't want to, rehash what happened too much. But Reed, since you were busy on deadline at that time, I want to have you give your thoughts. I mean, Rab and I, one of the conclusions we made is just that, look, this was a very good LSU team, but they were one rung on the ladder below the great teams in the country. And every time they stepped up to that class, that kind of got proven.
Yeah, they were. And I think, just from a micro sense, what they were missing in the UCLA game is just a sharp second quarter, right? And I think that's ultimately what proved to be the difference between a season ending in the Elite Eight and a season going to the Final Four. I mean, it's the NCAA tournament. The margins are thin already. UCLA is a really good team. It's one of the deepest teams in the country. It's got shooters. It's got tons of shooters around Lauren Betts. So it's not just Lauren Betts in the middle. And I think the shooting really put them over the edge. And I think you could see the difference between the depth of teams. Overall in the offseason, that if you zoom out, the challenge for Kim Mulkey and her staff was really finding the right complement of role players to go around the big three of Flau'jae, Michaela, and Anissa, right? And there were times this season where those role players played really well. I think Kaylin Gilbert gave LSU some really good games at really important times, and without her, you probably wouldn't have been a 3 seed, right? Maybe you dropped down to a 4 seed, maybe dropped down to a 5 seed because she almost single-handedly won you some games. But in the NCAA tournament, they couldn't find a way to get her going. Same is true for Cheyenne Day Wilson. She never really locked down the point guard position. So I think there's an alternate reality where those role players, the transfers they brought in, kind of step up and give LSU the depth it needs to get back to the Final Four. But you saw in the tournament that didn't really happen. It was really just the 3 stars, and that's really all LSU had. And then they had a rough shooting night, and now they're on the outside looking in for the second year in a row.
And if I may read, LSU went 31-6 this year. 4 of those losses are teams that are in the Final Four: 2 to Texas, 1 to South Carolina, and obviously 1 to UCLA. Is it telling that they went 0-4 against those teams? To Zach's point, that maybe they were just a rung below, the top, the elite teams in women's basketball. Or do you think they were right there? Just things didn't go their way.
They were right there, but they're still kind of a rung below. I think they had enough talent to compete with those teams. The big three. That's as talented as a trio as anywhere in the country. So top to bottom, LSU was as talented as any team in the country, right? But talent can only get you so far. You have to have the right combination of role players to put around the talent, right? It has to be a cohesive unit, and we saw that, last season with Haley Van Lith. Haley's a great player, obviously, but the puzzle pieces kind of just didn't fit perfectly together, right? And I think LSU's still looking for that right cohesive blend of star power and role players that we saw carry them to a title in 2023. So if they can get that, I think they can probably get back to the Final Four. But they just have to make the puzzle pieces fit, and I think that's the challenge going into the off season again.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at those 4 games you referenced, Rab, against the Final Four teams, they, none of them were blowouts. They lost by 10. And then actually, ironically or coincidentally, by 7 3 times. The last 3 times they faced Texas twice, and then UCLA were all 7-point games. So it's not like LSU was way out of that league, but it's also not like any of those games came right down to the wire, and you go, oh well, if one if one more three goes in, or you get one more stop, you win that game. It wasn't quite that level either. And so I kind of feel like if you get those 4 shots and all 4 times you're like, going into the final minute of all 4 of those games, we had a pretty good idea of who was going to win the game. So you just weren't quite there. And Reed, I think it's a great point. Kind of this roster churn that all college basketball teams go through every single year. LSU's got to get that right to take the next step. And so to me, that's kind of where I want to go next. And the first step of that is who do you lose? Okay. And LSU has lost, I think, one name in last year, Poa, that wasn't a huge surprise. She never quite seemed like the right fit at point guard for Kim Mulkey. She kind of was in and out of the lineup. The other one I would rate as a higher surprise to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but Samaya Smith, who was kind of growing into her role on this team, had a couple of really big games in the NCAA tournament and had 2 years of eligibility left. Losing her to me hurts.
It definitely does. It's a big loss because without her, you already had to replace the size and the rebounding that you were losing in Anissa Moro. So you already had that need in the transfer portal for some size and some front court depth, right? But now you lose Samaya Smith. Now that need becomes even greater, I think. Samaya, she had kind of an up and down season as she was trying to recover from her second major knee injury, right? It takes a while to get your legs back under you and get back into a rhythm, right? And it just felt like she figured things out at the perfect time when the game started to matter most. And in the NCAA tournament, she was playing legitimately the best basketball of her career. And you saw that trajectory just get back to where it was before she got hurt, right? You could see almost like it was on a perfect angle up. Her freshman year, she showed some flashes. You could see the potential in her. But she never quite put it together coming off the bench, giving LSU some minutes there. And then her sophomore year, she takes this leap, right? She's rebounding, she's scoring at a super high level, blocking shots. And then she gets hurt, goes down, and has to reset and get back to that point. And so I think it's been a slow journey for her getting back to that point. And it was pretty cool to see her, really put it all together in the NCAA tournament. And now she's gone out the door, trying to find another place to finish her career. So yeah, it's a big loss for LSU just because it doesn't have the opportunity to help her keep building on what she showed in the tournament, right? And now it needs some experienced player. It has to find somebody who can step in right away and contribute, because this team, it's got the #1 freshman class coming in, but it doesn't exactly have patience. It doesn't exactly have time to let them develop and then become the players that they can be. They need players who can help them right away and help them get to the Final Four, help them get to the national championship right away, because that's what this program aspires to be.
Yeah, Rab, what do you make of these transfers out? I mean, again, every program is going to go through this. Every program loses players. In some cases, it's never going to be said out loud, but the program is okay with losing the players. And I last year, Poa may or may not be in that category. Samaya Smith is definitely not in that category. I think LSU would have loved to have her back. But what do you kind of make of these two departures?
Yeah, Poa, I think she would have provided depth, and Reed and I talked about this recently. She maybe saw the writing on the wall a little bit with this guard-heavy freshman class coming in. And then you figure LSU's going to try to get a veteran point guard if they can in the portal. So that she's probably seeing her playing time is going to be limited, and she got one more year. By the way, her year, right, Reed, is because of the NCAA ruling that was allowing people to not have their junior college career count against them, right?
Yeah, it all stems, if you remember, the Diego Pavia lawsuit, how he filed a lawsuit trying to get an extra eligibility because he had the JUCO years, all that blanket waiver for all players, Division I, who can pick up an extra year if they were set to run out of eligibility. So Poa fell in that camp.
Yeah, this ruling means that LSU is going to have to play Diego Pavia when they go to Vanderbilt this fall in October to play football because of this fair ruling. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. Smith, you hit it. Actually, she's a big loss. Obviously, you were losing Anissa Moro as well. She's done with her eligibility, and obviously she's bound for the WNBA. But Smith, you kind of figured you'd pair her with some newcomer or two, in the low post. Now you got to go find two, and it reminds me a little bit. I was looking at the stats of Kim Mulkey's first season when Faustina Fua and Autumn Newby left. They were the two big post presences. And Autumn Newby, what she averaged 8 rebounds a game, and Faustina Fua was a big contributor down low. And so all they did was go out and get Angel Reese and LaDasia Williams in the transfer portal and stuff like that. But it's certainly a big loss. Shocking, yes, but in the traditional sense, but in the current context of college athletics, it's not that shocking. I mean, you see, you're right. You're seeing players every year, veteran players who you think are established stars at their schools leaving. I mean, we just saw Olivia Miles into the transfer portal, Notre Dame's point guard. We just saw Tanaya Latson, who played against LSU in the second round of the tournament at the PMAC, the leading scorer in the country, into the portal from Florida State. And players can always go back as well. This does happen as well, but more likely they're leaving. And it's really something has to be done. This is not, players deserve to get something in NIL, and players deserve some autonomy. But I was making this analogy to my wife. Jaden Daniels can't go to the GM with the Washington Commanders and say, "Hey, I had a great rookie season. You're gonna need to give me some more money, or I'm out of here." No, he's got a rookie contract which means this is all leading to collective bargaining, in my opinion, in college athletics, which I also hate, but it might be the lesser of two evils in this case.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Zach, but I'm glad, Brad, you brought that up, because Kim Mulkey had some really interesting things to say on Tuesday. She was talking to T-Bob and Jacob Hester on her weekly radio hit she does with them, and she sounded really just tired of it. She sounded sick of it. She sounded kind of exhausted of having to deal with all the transfer portal. I don't think she has a problem with the portal. I don't think she has a problem with the fact that players can make money now. I think her problem is the way the calendar is set up, right? Because she said she was having to call recruits in the portal on the plane ride back from the loss to UCLA, and she didn't have time to let it sit or reflect on it or anything. So I think she and a lot of other coaches have that frustration, the way the calendar's set up, the way how it's all become kind of the wild west right now, right? And I think the NCAA kind of did this to itself by trying to fight against this era of NIL and the transfer portal for so long, and now what's left of it is this crazy, anything goes landscape, right? And that coaches have to navigate, and it's probably going to keep going until the NCAA lets the players unionize and then strike a collective bargaining agreement, because anytime they try to put a rule in place, they're going to get sued, and that rule is going to have to be overturned. So I absolutely think you're right, but in the meantime, these coaches are going to have to navigate this crazy landscape.
Yeah, and I think it's going to have to come to a head sooner or later, because I'm glad you brought that up, Reed. That's where I was going to, is Kim Mulkey, when she sounds fed up, I mean, she's the biggest no excuses, let's go make it work with what we've got coach that there is. And when she's getting tired of it, she's a lifer in this. You see Coach K retire a couple years ago, Nick Saban retires. I mean, maybe some of that's coincidence. Those guys were getting older anyway, but like at a certain point,
right,
they just don't want to do it anymore. Yeah. This, I'm thinking of college coaches leaving for NFL programs on the football side. We've seen that over and over again also this offseason, because the college coach, it's just easier to go deal when there's contracts in place and you're talking to players who are employees. Everybody understands it. I like the Jaden Daniels analogy. It's not like I'm going to go play for the Cowboys if you don't double my salary. You can't do that. Just like, just like that doesn't work in most workplaces. So anyway, as of right now, LSU does have, besides Samaya Smith and last tier Poa, everybody else coming back who was eligible. Cheyenne Day Wilson is out of eligibility. Anissa Morrow is out of eligibility. Those two are the major players who will not be returning as well. And that leaves Flau'jae Johnson. And, she is eligible to return. She has not entered the transfer portal or anything. But Reed, she's also eligible to go to the WNBA. So she's kind of the decision, I think, that's left on the table that could really change the way LSU's roster is formulated in 2025-26.
Yeah, she's the first big domino. I think it really, her decision really informs what LSU needs the most in the portal. If she stays, then I think it can put most of its eggs in the front court basket. But if she leaves, then it's going to need another shot creator in the backcourt, right? like a Tanaya Latson, like an Olivia Miles, right? Maybe it goes after those big fish if Flau'jae decides to leave. We're still waiting on a decision. I don't know exactly when she'll make that decision. I think it has to come either today or tomorrow. But the WNBA is exactly clear as to what their deadline is or how hard they enforce that deadline. It's sort of like they want to hear from you within 48 hours of your last game ending if you're in the Elite Eight, but you have some kind of leeway there. Maybe you hear from them 10 days before the draft, which is tomorrow since the draft is April 14th. Either way is that the decision is coming soon, and we should hear from Flau'jae pretty quickly here. And her decision informs a lot of their needs in the transfer portal. So I think LSU has to, kind of tread lightly, do due diligence around the portal, and just see what they have. But ultimately, it won't know exactly what it needs most from the portal until she gives them her firm decision.
Hey, Reed, there's been a lot of tea leaf reading with Flau'jae. I mean, the way she spoke after the game, right after they lost to UCLA, it sounded to me like she's saying she's coming back, right? I mean, you could extrapolate on that. And you see one of their members of this recruiting class who was playing in the McDonald's All-American game. I forgot. I don't know who it was. She said she talked about looking forward to playing with Flau'jae, which maybe indicates that Flau'jae has given her an indication that she's going to be back. I mean, anybody can say anything, obviously. Journalistically, you really can't trust people. You really can't trust them now. But there has been this kind of trying to divine what is going on with her from some of these clues.
Sure. Yeah. It was me and a reporter from The Athletic. We were talking to her after the game in the locker room. And, as always, you can always count on Flau'jae to tell you exactly what she's thinking, exactly what she's feeling, right? She's really genuine and she doesn't have a problem sort of speaking her mind. She's a lot like Mulkey in that sense, right? So she was just talking. She was like, I want my own championship. I want a championship. And I was thinking, like, wait a second, you already have a championship, right? You won a championship in 2023. And she was like, no, that was, I'm grateful for that. I played a big part in that. But, she didn't say this, but she, the subtext here was that championship belongs to Angel Reese. It belongs to Alexis Morris, right? She wants one where she's the leader on the team, right? And now that Samaya, now that Poa is gone, if she comes back to LSU, she's going to be the only contributor from that team still on the roster next season. And she's one of the best players in the country. So theoretically, if LSU were to get back to the Final Four next year and maybe win the championship again, then that would be her championship. And she said that's one thing she wanted. That's one thing she's looking for. And I think that's probably a bigger factor in this decision than any kind of, financial money-wise implication here, because she's going to be set either way, whether she goes to the W this year or not. In terms of money, maybe she can make a couple moves here to maximize that earning potential, but it's not really a money thing. I think it's more so the motivation of a championship, maybe her draft stock, exactly what it looks like, versus the need to really balance all that and find out what she wants to prioritize.
Yeah, I think we saw this with, you mentioned Olivia Miles, who's in the transfer portal from Notre Dame and is coming back to college basketball because she thinks she can make just as much or more in NIL money than she would in the WNBA. That's kind of a phenomenon specific to women's basketball, where these women are stars in the college game. And then, we saw that translate with Caitlin Clark to a certain extent with Angel Reese, but it doesn't translate with everyone. And that, Angel and Caitlin were able to get endorsement deals and things like that in the WNBA. Not every player is going to be able to do that. And so you look at Olivia Miles or you look at Flau'jae Johnson and say, well, if she comes back and gets an NIL package, she has her music career, she has endorsements. I mean, all those things, like, she can make it financially a very strong move for herself if she decides to come back to school. And so I think that, combined with sort of the old school, more emotional, like, I want to win my own championship or be the leader on a championship team, and looking at the recruiting class that LSU has coming in, like, to me, and I'm not inside the locker room like you have been, Reed, and in the press conferences, but I'm leaning towards she's coming back. Are you guys in agreement with that?
Rab?
With Flau'jae, I think so. I mean, for some of the reasons you mentioned, it doesn't. benefit. It's not like this huge financial windfall she can get if she turns pro. And I will, if I may, hearken a little bit to the Olivia Dunn situation with her coming back for her 5th year at LSU this year. It benefited her brand. Yeah, there are a lot of factors with her, but one of the factors I think was that it benefited her brand to continue to call herself All-American Olivia Dunn. And people think she's All-American. Yes, she did win an All-American award as a freshman, so she is legitimately an All-American. So I think that benefited her brand to be able to say that one more year. And of course, now she's going to be out of eligibility and she has to go on. So I think it benefits Flau'jae Johnson to again be the star with LSU. LSU's got a good brand. We've seen in some of the commercials she does, which still blows my mind that we're talking about college athletes doing the commercials when, a school couldn't give them an extra sandwich a few years ago or a snack, and she's sitting in the PMAC, right? Reed, you're shooting some of these commercials. And so I think all that, now you can have a brand in the WNBA, obviously, and that's important. But I think the way people identify her right now, I think it benefits her to stay another year. Why not? It's not an extra year. And if she is motivated by you trying to win another championship, then that's good for LSU. We could be surprised. This has become one of those things where it's easy to be made to look a fool, making predictions about what happens with this athlete or not, whether they stay or go or whatever. And I didn't understand exactly why Angel Reese wanted to leave Maryland, a good program, and she was from Baltimore and all that stuff. She was at home, but obviously it worked out for her. So, I think she stays. But I will qualify it by the fact that we just don't honestly know what's going on anymore in college sports.
Yeah, she and her team are very marketing savvy. I think they did a good job of attaching Flau'jae's brand to the March Madness brand and capitalizing on the moment in college basketball where everybody's talking about college basketball, and that's March Madness, right? She had all these extra deals pouring in right when March hit. So I think they're very savvy there. And there's a couple things that people aren't exactly talking about that I think are important to point out. One of them is that LSU can, as expected, soon start sharing revenue with its athletes, right? And we don't know exactly what the framework will look like. We don't know how LSU will approach that and divvy up that money amongst its athletic programs, but we do know that theoretically Flau'jae, that's something she can benefit from. And when you start thinking about what a WNBA rookie contract looks like, that's only about a 5-figure deal. Could she get that from LSU next year? We're not sure. Maybe, theoretically she probably could. And the other thing is the WNBA CBA, right? The WNBA has an opt-out in its current CBA that the players are expected to opt out of pretty soon. And then they start working on a new deal. That new deal could be in place before the 2026 season, before the 2026 draft, and that could usher in a larger pay scale for the rookies, which means that if Flau'jae goes to the draft, not this year, but next year, then she'll be setting herself up for a little bit of a bigger payday because that new rookie scale contracts are going to be in place with a potential new CBA. So I think those are factors as well. And it hasn't gotten too much of attention here. I think Flau'jae is kicking all of that around and trying to come to a decision this week.
All right, important context there. And we're going to turn the page and kind of talk about going into next year for LSU. And of course, the Flau'jae conversation is a big part of that, but they're also seeking help in the transfer portal, both to replace the players that they lost and to supplement this great recruiting class. We are going to kind of flip the page and talk about the offseason and next season for LSU right after we take a quick 30-second break.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With quick picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Okay, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. We ask you to subscribe to our LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. That is where we're going to post all of these in video form. Of course, you can also go on the podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, and find us as well. But YouTube is where we post some extra videos. The post-game shows, all that kind of stuff comes up on YouTube. So go subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications, share with your friends, comment, and like. Appreciate all of that. Okay, moving on. We talked about Flau'jae and whether she may return or not. And as you put it, Reed, that's kind of the first domino in this conversation. But there are some other pretty big dominoes out there. You mentioned Tania Latson. You mentioned Olivia Miles. Some big names. Sarah Smith of Wisconsin's another one in the paint. LSU goes big game hunting in the portal. That's where they found Angel Reese. That's where they found Anissa Morrow. Like they will go after these big names. What are you hearing, and what do you think is the direction LSU goes this offseason?
Well, when you look at the last time LSU had 4 players coming into their freshman class, and that class was the #1 class in the country, LSU went after the top 2 players in the portal and got both of them. It was Haley Van Lith, and then it was Anissa Morrow, right? So I do expect LSU to go after the big fish. But this year, the big fish, the top 2, I think, are guards. Tania Latson and Olivia Miles. Both of them are going to have their choice of wherever they want to go, right? I'd imagine every top program is in the country is going to be giving them calls, trying to recruit them, trying to bring them on. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision, because any team would love to have those 2. They just have to decide what's the best fit for them. And so say if you're Tania Latson, if you're Olivia Miles, you come in LSU, it's kind of already Flau'jae's team. It's kind of already Michaela's team. Do you want to step into a team like that? Maybe put yourself in a similar position that Haley Van Lith put herself in and found out the hard way exactly how tough that would be. So I think LSU is probably going to wind up with one of the top post players if they make a push at one of them. If they try to go hard after one of them. You mentioned, I think it's pronounced Sarah Williams. I could be getting that wrong, but
it's spelled Serah, which is why I may be confused. And I think I said Smith also.
Samaya Smith, Sarah
Williams
Sarah
from Wisconsin.
Williams, she would be a wonderful fit. Really good defender. I think that's what Kim Mulkey and her staff like about her. She averaged about 18 and 11, if I'm getting that right. So she's got some size and length that LSU, I'm sure, would love to have. The other name I think you want to throw out there is Cody McMahon from Ohio State. She's a little like Anissa Morrow, undersized, kind of 4 player. She is not the rebounder or the scorer that Anissa Morrow is. I want to make that clear. But she can sort of step in and fill that void at the 4 that LSU has. I'm sure LSU would love to have her physicality on the defensive end and maybe her ball handling as well. And then the other name, and Rab, you mentioned this to me the other day, is Kate Koval from Notre Dame. She's a rising sophomore. She's in the portal. She's 6'5". We know that LSU pursued her out of high school. They kind of made a run at her before she committed to Notre Dame. Now she's in the portal, and it could be someone that LSU circles back to and starts flirting with again.
Supposedly, if I'm remembering her recruiting right, supposedly Koval was a player who liked LSU a lot, but her parents really wanted her to go to a really great academic school, which is Notre Dame. But obviously, things didn't work out well there. And like this again, it goes to illustrate Miles and Koval goes to illustrate what we're talking about, the unpredictability of college athletics now, the volatility. And Notre Dame's got a real good program going. They were #1 in the country for part of the season. They were a top 3 seed, like LSU made it to the Sweet 16, and have a really good, really good program going on. And they're potentially losing these 2 top players. So it's what are their reasons? I obviously we don't know. We're not in South Bend, but it just goes to show you how it's not just LSU. I guess the point I'm trying to make, certainly not just LSU. And everyone is prone to getting surprised. Is South Carolina, who's their real great six player off the bench?
Malaysia Fulwiley.
Oh, yeah. If she left after the Final Four, it's like, what? That would be really shocking. But but people are getting surprised all over the map, and it reshuffles the deck, and you got to see what happens. I think you make a good point about Miles and Latson. Does this fit what they want? What is the bigger priority for LSU is the question here. I think is it getting a point guard to go to the show, which obviously they were lacking this year, and it didn't quite work out with Haley Van Lith last year, or is it? It seems to be to me to be the post, because obviously you lost Smith, so that seems to be the case. Can one of these can the freshman forward, the one forward they have come in and start right away, like Michaela did as a freshman? That's a big question too. So a lot of priorities for LSU in the transfer portal.
Yeah, that's really the other factor here is how much can these incoming freshmen contribute, right? And no, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's different with every freshman. Basketball is obviously a sport where we see freshmen contribute. The top ranked player, and again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, but Divine Borage or Barrage.
I think it's Barrage, but I'm not.
Okay. She's a guard. And then Grace Knox is right behind her. I think she's ranked 11th in the country, and she's a 6'2" post player.
Yeah,
so
she's the one post player.
So, Kim Mulkey probably has a better idea than we do, certainly, of whether those incoming freshmen can contribute, but she probably doesn't even know for sure until she gets them in some workouts and sees them in scrimmages and things like that. And of course, you have to make the decision on these transfers before that. So it's kind of a tricky situation. But I do think we've seen the success that Kim Mulkey has had in the transfer portal before. And yeah, Haley Van Lith, it didn't work out, but you could also sell some of these players and say, well, look at what happened to Angel Reese. She left a good situation for Baton Rouge, and it made her career. Not to say she couldn't have had a WNBA career without that, but certainly she played under a bigger spotlight at LSU. That's what you're selling here. You look at playing with Flau'jae is certainly a selling point too. And I don't know. Like, I think you hit on it though, Reb. I think you need a post player, if not two, and I think you need a point guard because you've talked about this before, Reed. The missing piece from the 2023 national championship team and the last 2 years has been an effective point guard. Alexis Morris was very effective in Kim Mulkey's system. The last 2 years, last year, Poa and blanking on her name.
Van Lith.
Well, there was Van Lith last year, but then this year,
Cheyenne
Wilson.
Yeah. They just never quite seem to click in that system. And so finding that to me is key as well.
It's hard to find someone who can run the system well. Alexis Morris did such a good job because she knew Kim Mulkey so well. She played for Kim Mulkey at Baylor, right? So, find it. If you can just find an Alexis Morris, then I'd say that LSU is, winning another championship, right? But it's tough. Alexis Morrises don't exactly grow on trees, and Kim Mulkey and her staff, they also have to balance, the fact is, hey, say they start looking at a couple guards here, do they lose a couple of their returners to the portal? I think they really like Miracle Shepherd. They love her defense. I think they think that she can be a good ball handler. I think she's a good fit for the system. They love Jada Richard. She's more of a scorer. She's more of a shooter. But does she have enough size to play the kind of defense that Kim Mulkey wants from that position? We don't know. And then the freshmen are kind of an unknown. So, it is a delicate dance to play here, to go at the portal, to try to make everybody happy. Do you prioritize the players that are already in your locker room, or do you try to go after some that are in the portal and risk losing the ones you already have? It's a pretty difficult position. I've heard coaches say that you have to, the most important players to recruit are the ones that are already in your locker room. But as the tournament rolled on, coaches around the country were having to, balance and juggle the needs of preparing their team for these do or die games while also looking at the portal and trying not to fall behind there. So I'd imagine LSU is trying to make those same decisions, and it should all come to fruition in the next couple of weeks.
If there's a silver lining to LSU not making the Final Four, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, it's that it gives them more of a jump for the to the transfer portal. I know it sounds crazy. I mean, you need to focus on this year and trying to win a national championship, and they had a chance. I mean, things had fallen LSU's way. We talked about all the teams, the Final Four teams they lost to, but they had a chance. They had the makings of a team that if there were a couple of upsets, maybe they could have gotten there. But now they had, like Reed said, they were talking to recruits on the way home from Spokane, and now there's more time to do that. I'm pretty sure they were hosting at least a Zoom call with someone once they got back, on the Monday. So if there's any kind of silver lining to the way the season ended, it might be that for next year, because you have a real chance, assuming Flau'jae comes back and you have Michaela Williams coming back and they're healthy and all those things. And this freshman class coming in, you have a real chance. Couldn't the transfer portal situation get mitigated, Reed, by the fact that could Grace Knox maybe start at forward, or could I don't know which one of the guards is a point guard. Bella Hines, I know, is a shooting guard. But
Divine Barrage is more than
okay.
point guard.
I mean, it's possible, right, that one of those kids could be good enough. So if they don't specifically get a huge name at one of those places, doesn't mean all is lost for LSU in 25-26.
No, they're going to be good. I mean,
yeah, I think Grace Knox could start theoretically if they need her to, but I think ideally for a team that wants to make it to the Final Four, you want to have some veterans that can get you there. So,
yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because Kim Mulkey had this conversation, kind of off the cuff conversation with the reporter from WLSU in the aftermath of Sunday's game, where it kind of got context viral. Reed, you can explain.
It was KLSU, the student radio.
Hey, I'm sorry, KLSU, not WLSU.
I'm gonna correct you there. Student media at LSU.
When I was a child, it was WLSU. Back they were on telegraphs. It was very very long ago.
But
shout out KLSU.
But the KLSU reporter, I thought asked a fair question in regards to, it may not have been worded exactly the way you would want to word it, but it's always delicate to ask questions of these coaches after a loss that ends your season, because emotions are so raw. And basically asking, this is the second straight year that you have fallen one step short of the Final Four. Is this a disappointment? And now I think what gets lost is that Kim Mulkey has this kind of sarcastic sense of humor, and she asked the reporter, is that good or is that terrible? And I think he was kind of trying to joke back with her maybe, and said, it's terrible. And so she goes, well, I think it's pretty good. How many Final Fours have you made? And that kind of that was the headline that everybody pulled out of that and said, oh, look at Kim Mulkey bullying this student reporter. I don't really think that's what was going on. You guys can chime in on that if you want. I don't think she was bullying anybody. I think she was just kind of being sarcastic, which is what she is.
Yeah, I was in the room. It was kind of, she meant it as more of a playful exchange. She likes to do that to all of us. She'll do that to students. She'll do that to, the older guys like Rab. She'll throw little barbs at you in the press conference if you're not careful. So I think the KLSU kid, his name is Jaden. He did a good job handling it. I thought he throw a little barb at her. Still get into his question. And it was just more of just a playful back and forth that I think people kind of misconstrued there. But yeah, it's the subtext of this is, how do you get back to the Final Four? And that's the question. It's a fair question. I thought he handled that well. It might not have been worded perfectly, but he set himself up to take a little jab from Mulkey, and I thought he handled it well.
Yeah, and that's
what truth to the rumor that he's in the transfer portal, right? Because no, I don't think it's true.
Look, I do think it does underline the point that Elite Eights are very good. You might even say they're elite. They are not exactly where this program wants to be, and that's kind of this double-edged sword of high expectations. Is like you're going to be good. LSU is going to be good every single year. But I think the fan base, I think the roster, certainly if you listen to like what Flau'jae said about wanting to win a national championship, and the coaching staff, I think everybody where they feel like they belong is back in the Final Four. And Rab, if you look at this roster, and we'll see what happens in the portal, we'll see what happens with Flau'jae, but that's going to be the expectation again next season.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot since this season ended, and thinking it might make for like a good column, what are, for the LSU's big programs, the high profile programs, football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and gymnastics. What are the expectations, for next season? What is fair? What's realistic? What's out there? I think the expectations for LSU women's basketball become very high. And let's remember, a little, pull back a little bit. It wasn't that long ago when LSU was an afterthought in women's basketball. Once again, they'd been very good, obviously in the Simone Augustus, Sylvia Fowles, Pokey Chapman coaching era. with the 5 straight Final Fours, and they went to a couple of Sweet 16s under Nikki Fargas, but they were not a nationally relevant program, and now they are suddenly again. And now it's like, well, Elite Eight's not good enough, and look, it's no, you don't have to be satisfied. Like Kim Mulkey said, she set the bar high herself. She said, after they beat Florida State to go to the Sweet 16, so we don't aim to go to the Sweet 16. They aim higher than that. So the expectations are going to be high next year. The expectation right now is that, obviously they're bringing in the number 1 recruiting class, and they're going to go in the portal, and they're going to mix it in with some of the veterans returning, and they're going to have a great team again next year. That when it's all said and done, I'll be shocked if LSU's not in the top 10, and if things go their way, they could well be in the top 5, going to next season. It's just in terms of people's predictions and expectations. So, it's fair or not, but they've very quickly created a bit of a beast where the expectations have gotten very high again, and went took it to a level 2 years ago that LSU women's basketball has never been at, which is winning a national championship, much less even playing for one. LSU never even gotten to the national championship game, so that's going to continue to be as long as Kim Mulkey's here, and I don't think that's going to change it. And she's a big reason for it, and I think she understands that as well as anybody.
Reed, you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that's the expectation now. Kim Mulkey, her career lends itself to thinking that any team she coaches has a shot at the Final Four, and that's not to say that every one of them will get there. The only round of the tournament where she has a losing record is the Elite Eight. I believe, Rab, correct me if I'm wrong, she's 5-8 now in the Elite Eight. So she's not going to break through every time, but she will position her team to break through if, one, that they can get the right pieces in place, and 2, if they can get a couple breaks that they need to get there. Right? You need a little bit of luck. Most teams need a little bit of luck to get to the Final Four. I don't think LSU got it this year. Maybe they get it next year, and maybe they have a team that's a little more suited to get there. I think back to LaDacia Williams and how big she was in the tournament run in 2023. Maybe you get a player like her from the portal who's just there for 1 year, who's a veteran, who's been there before, who knows how to step up in those big moments. Maybe you get a player like her, and she can carry you, through a round, through the Sweet 16 or whatever. So, it's the expectation. I'm not sure it's exactly fair to expect them to go to the Final Four every year, but that's the reality of covering a Kim Mulkey coach team. It's always going to have a chance. Her career, almost every team she's coached has had a chance to get there, and so that's the standard that she set.
Yeah, that's what they will go into next season with. So we will continue to follow it. As for this year's Final Four, guys, let's end here. Let's do a quick little predictions. Reed, who you got in the championship game and winning it all? It is UCLA, the team that beat LSU. They face UConn, the only team LSU hasn't played this year, and also the only team that isn't a number 1 seed in this year's Final Four, but they're the betting favorite. UConn is to win the whole thing. And then on the other side, it's the SEC matchup, South Carolina versus Texas, round 4 coming up.
When I filled out my bracket, I had UConn and South Carolina meeting in the championship, so I'm going to stick to that. And I had UConn winning, so I'm going to stick to that as well. Nobody can guard Paige Beckers right now. Nobody can stop her right now. UConn feels like the team of destiny. It feels like this is the year they get back to winning a national championship for the first time since 2016. I mean, that's a crazy long drought for them. So I think it really feels like the year that this is the year that ends. When you talk about expectations and standards, those they got some expectations and standards up there at UConn. So I think they'll get there.
Definitely true. Rab, how about you?
I hate to say exactly the same thing, but that's the way I feel. I think it's UConn and South Carolina in the final. Texas has had a great season, but they just don't. Reed and I have talked about this more than once. They just don't wow you. I know they've got Booker, and they've got some great players, and they play really aggressive defense, but they don't score. For some reason they don't have the ability to score a lot. And the UCLA, I just think. I know the number 1 overall seed, and they've only lost to USC twice this year when they had Juju Watkins, of course. So I don't know. I just don't think they're ready for this stage. I think it's going to be these two the programs. UConn hasn't won a national title. Talking about expectations, they haven't won a national title for a decade, which is a long time by UConn standards. They've won 11 under Gino Auriemma. And I will say, too, and I'm getting old, too, but Gino's looking a little old. If they were to win this year, and I know Becca says she's coming back, right? Yeah. No, she's not coming back.
She's going to the W.
She's going. Oh, that's right. She said she's going pro. With her going pro, if they win it this year, he might just say, "This is it." I mean, talk about nothing more to prove, and he's in
going out on top. Yeah,
and so I like UConn over South Carolina as well. Yes.
I think that has to be the expectation going in, right? Like I don't know if like Texas and UCLA are good teams. They could certainly surprise you, but that's got to be the expectation going in. And I think it's cool. Just the last 20 years, UConn was the dominant program, and then they kind of passed that baton to South Carolina, who's been the dominant program over the llast 6 to 8 years. They haven't actually played that much in the tournament. They've only played in the final once, and that's so surprising. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that again on Sunday afternoon if they both survive tomorrow night. So I think we're all on the same page there. Any other? You guys want to do men's picks, or Rab, you want to do a Masters pick before we sign off? This is your chance, man.
Masters pick. I was not. Obviously, it's the Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy show, right? Scotty is trying to repeat and become the first one since other than Jack Nicklaus to win 3 out of 4. Some of the time Tiger Woods did, and he's number 1 in the world. And then Rory's going for the career Grand Slam yet again. So because of that, I think it could be someone else entirely. Someone like a young guy like Ludwig Oberg, who was a runner-up last year, seems to be a trendy pick. Or maybe a Bryson DeChambeau. You never know with the live golf guys what they're doing. But Scotty's not quite on form, although he played well in Houston last week. And Rory's playing great. But God, can you get over that middle hump of coming close to the Masters so many times and not winning? So I'm going to go with a young guy, like Oberg. He seems to be a trendy pick, and he's got tremendous game.
I'm going Colin Morikawa.
But he doesn't owe you an interview. He doesn't owe us an interview afterwards. I bet they make him talk to us in the media. I think at the Masters.
Men's Final Four. Anybody? I'm going to slight upset in the semifinals. I'll take Auburn to beat Florida, but then I got Duke winning it all.
So who's in it on the men's side?
Auburn, Florida. It's same as the women's. You got an all SEC semi, Duke, and Florida and Auburn, and then Duke plays Houston on the other side, which to me might be the true national championship. Those SEC teams, as good as the SEC was this year, I don't know that either one of them are as good as Duke and Houston.
Yeah, I don't have room in my brain for the men's side, but I'll go Duke and Auburn. I like Duke. I like the way they play.
That would be a great matchup. Janai Broom against Cooper Flag. I don't know. Florida, I keep waiting for them to get knocked. I kept waiting for them to get knocked out. I said, they're gonna strike. The clock's gonna strike midnight. But Florida's got a tremendous team.
They do. And they should have been knocked out, but teams win it after surviving some of those.
Right, exactly. So I like Florida in the final against Duke. Again, I think Houston maybe not quite as good offensively, and then I picked Duke in our bracket. In the pool I was in, I started 15-1 the first day, and then after that, I don't want to talk about it. But I did start 15-1.
That's how these things go. All right. This has been a good podcast. We have recapped LSU's women's basketball season. We will continue to track their activity in the transfer portal, both ingoing and outgoing. Of course, if Flau'jae happens to go pro, that's probably worthy of a podcast all in itself. So stay tuned to the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. He's Reed Darcey and Scott Rabalais. I'm Zach Ewing. We will be back next week. Thank you all for watching.